Thank you all so much for tuning in to a special episode of Connect. As you can see, we're in a lovely venue. We're down here at Woodruff Art Center for BuiltTech Week, thanks to Shadow Ventures. And right now, I have Cliff Moser.
Hello, good morning.
Senior Product Manager at Stanford Healthcare.
Correct, yes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And tell us a little bit more about Stanford Healthcare.
Well, Stanford Healthcare is a part of Stanford Medicine in Palo Alto, part of Stanford University. And we're a healthcare service provider for the Bay Area. We're in the process now of just completing. We'll look to have it completed for staff and stock probably sometime in February next year, our $2.5 billion hospital project.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And so what brings you to BuiltTech Week?
Well, I know KP Reddy. I've worked with him in the past. Actually, we were competitors probably about 10, 11 years ago. We were working with outsourcing building information modeling and CAD files. So I worked closely with him when I was living in LA. I'm a healthcare architect, been working in California healthcare architecture for probably about 20 years, 30 years total experience in healthcare. But California healthcare is different than healthcare in other parts of the country because of seismic requirements. So I was building hospitals down in Los Angeles and met KP through a number of venues. I think the one workplace involvement was with when he was briefly involved with Gary Technology. And we were focusing on how to outsource a lot of building information modeling, but also how to add value and more information into the models. So it wasn't just a kind of a smart CAD file. And then I moved on, started working for Kaiser Permanente, a healthcare organization that is started in the Bay Area, now is in Southern California as well as the Northeast, and I think they're also out in the Mid-Atlantic states and also here in Georgia as well. And we have hundreds of hospitals as well as other healthcare facilities. So we wanted to kind of figure out how to make our buildings as smart as the doctors and nurses and patients that were going into the buildings. So it started all with about the design of the projects and making the buildings, the modeling more intelligent, but also having it so that when you walk into a building now, you pull up your phone and the building knows where you are in the building. So now I work with Stanford because it's the kind of the premier place to work in the Bay Area.
That's
and
fascinating.
It's an exciting project.
Well, different type of natural disaster than an earthquake, but we're all still reeling from what happened, on the Gulf Coast because of Hurricane Michael.
Yes.
And, had very strong relation to Mexico Beach, Florida, that has just been decimated. And then, of course, now we're thinking, how do we rebuild that area in order to withstand 157-mile-hour winds and storm surges?
Absolutely.
And on that note, what are some considerations that have to go into California hospitals versus ones that go up in Atlanta, Georgia?
Well, we have, we had typically when you do building construction, you follow local jurisdiction, local building codes. And that means the same guy down the street who's inspecting plans for the local 7-Eleven or the mini mart is also doing it for the houses and also for the commercial buildings and also the hospitals. And that was what California was for a number of years. And after we had our two big earthquakes in '84 with Northridge in Southern California and in '89 in Northern California with Loma Prieta, the state put together a new agency that does nothing but inspect and review hospitals. So what happened at that point in time is they determined that probably about 80% of the infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure in California wouldn't survive a 6.0, 6.5 earthquake.
Wow.
So there was a big building boom. We probably spent about $20 billion building new hospitals there. And Stanford is one of the later ones. So.
So, I like to dig into the details.
Sure.
So I'm thinking rebar, glass width and strength and layout and, talk to me about some of the finite details.
Well, one of the seismic innovations on our project is called a base isolator.
Uh-huh.
And what a base isolator is it means that the columns that typically go down into the ground, down to bedrock, and then it goes up and the building is built around it. In our case, the columns go down into the ground, they come up about 4 feet, and then there's a series of ball bearing that are set on top of them.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so what happens, we have actually a moat around our hospital. It's a 6-foot wide moat, and we have a crawl space under our hospital, so that when there's a seismic event, a lot of people think that buildings move in a seismic event, but it's actually the ground that's moving.
Right.
So what we've done in our hospital is we have 208 of these base isolators that are about the size of a Fiat. They're fairly big. They weigh several tons, and they have the series, like I said, of ball bearings in there, so that the building can actually move 6 feet. Excuse me. The building's going to stand still. The ground can move 6 feet
Yes.
underneath the building, and what that enables is that the building, while it will probably move a little bit because something that heavy will have to kind of have some sort of reaction as the ground is moving, there'll be practically no damage in the building.
Wow.
A lot of buildings will do what they call braced frame, which is typically just making the building very rigid, so when the ground shakes, the building stands up. A lot of other buildings will put in moment frames so that the building can flex, if you will. But the idea is that the building needs to stand on its own and operate on its own for, I think, 72 hours. Our building will stand and operate on its own for at least 96 hours after a seismic event. That means it'll be completely off the network, taking care of its own water systems, gas systems, everything.
That's amazing. And thank you for doing that too, because I couldn't imagine, first of all, being in a hospital, right? And then going through a natural disaster where you are now worried about the quality of your care.
Exactly.
So that's huge.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're doing similar things with hurricanes as well in terms of rigidity, in terms of, setting up for flooding issues like that. I mean, a lot of the photographs after the recent events were the houses and structures that had been constructed to withstand, and they were the ones that were standing while all the other ones, were not.
It's shocking.
It is.
And very telling.
Yeah.
What do you hope to take away from BuiltTech Week?
Well, I'm excited because we have a lot of technology that's come into our realm. Everyone always talks about the productivity curve. I'm sure anyone can Google it and identify that while all other productivity in industry, factories, service industries has all gone up, and construction has actually stayed flat probably for the last 50, 60 years. And everyone always asks, well, why hasn't production gotten any more productive? And one of the things I like to tell people is, well, about 10 years ago, we used to kill people while we were building projects. and we don't do that anymore.
That's good.
It is a good thing. And I mean, when I started in this industry, I would probably work on job sites where 2 or 3 people would get killed during construction. Construction accidents are pretty awful. Right now, our project is one of the safest projects in the country. We've only had 1 lost time incident in probably the last 5 years, and that was for a torn rotator cuff.
Wow.
So for a $2.5 billion project, having only a torn rotator cuff is a good thing, but the productivity level has been flat. So what we're hoping with technology is now that we're able to see a lot of things on our iPads, tablets, all of our plans, while it used to be paper, they're now in PDFs. There's live models, so you can actually look at the building in a virtual model, as well as out on site. We have a lot of robotics involved with projects. So my hope is, a takeaway here is to find out new technology that's available, but also add my insight and expertise to communicating about what my needs are as a owner's representative, but also an architect for what I see as technology coming forward.
Awesome. Cliff, how can people connect with you after this episode? What's the best way? Is it LinkedIn? Is there a
LinkedIn.
website?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also, I've got a couple of books, written a number of papers, been real active professionally in the American Institute of Architects. So just type in my name and you'll find me somewhere.
Amazing. Well, from somebody who, drew floor plans as a young girl and still plays with Legos to this day, I have a profound respect for what you do. And
thank you.
Just thank you. Thank you for being here. And I can't wait to look you up online and read some of your work.
Oh, thank you. It's great. Nice meeting you, Tatiana. And this has been wonderful here.
Great.